you hear me all without the mic? Is that all right? Okay, I'm not going to scream. I'll use my classroom teacher voice instead. So thank you for milling about while we got started. We're starting almost on the dot, exactly. My name is Jacob Rydell. I'm the co-chair of the Future Practice Committee here at the AIA New York. My other co-chair, Andre Saluri, is on his way. He had to drop off his child this morning. We're going to get started because we have a very full day today. We're really excited to have everyone here. First of all, welcome. And it's welcome to AI for Everyone. I'm just going to give you a very quick introduction about the committee, and then I'm going to hand things over to the real organizers behind today's event, Shinru Liu, Dennis Sheldon. We're going to walk us through the day. But this very much has been a collaborative event. This is organized by the committee, which is really the culmination of a year's worth of work. There's Andre here. He's going to join us soon. But now's our chance to put in a plug for the committee itself. I'll just say, everyone, the Future Practice Committee we're in our third year now. Andre and I were the first basically co-founders. We kind of emerged from a combination of the technology committee and then also the idea of creating a committee that was looking specifically at issues of practice. And programming over the years has really reflected that. We think you really can't look at the future of architectural practice without looking at what is happening in technology and vice versa. So you'll see our programming tends to bucket into both technology and practice-related issues. We welcome, hello Andre, welcome here. We welcome everyone and anyone to join the programming of the committee. We meet the first Wednesday of every month. And as you'll see today, our events are more and more starting to emerge from the committee members themselves. This was very much today a project and a product of members of the committee. If you are interested in joining, one of the easiest ways is actually just to use this QR code. This will allow you to join our Slack group where all the action really takes place and a lot of the organizing takes place. So feel free to use the QR code, or if you can reach out to any of us, talk to us today. We would love to have you join us. Just to give you a sense of what we've been doing. Sorry, Andre, if you want to say, well, to hear your voice.
Yeah.
This is Andre.
Yeah. So besides the technology, which we're here for today, the other half of the committee, we focus on issues of practice. But we're not interested so much in traditional professional practice issues, but sort of structural issues that affect the profession. And a lot of the hot button issues that no one really wants to talk about, we try to talk about. So as you can see here, we had an event on the value of architects, the agency of architects, and we also just did an event, 3 weeks ago on risk, why architects have kind of been trained not to take risk. And as we learned in our prior events, that's actually one of the key issues which are devaluing architects and decreasing agency. So if you're interested in any of these types of issues, please join us for our committee meetings and get involved. As Jacob said, the QR code will get you into our Slack, and that's how we communicate. But we meet every month, the first, usually Wednesday of every month.
Yeah, and we really are experimenting with different formats too. So you see in this picture with the risk event, it was really actually a roundtable format, a roundtable in the middle panel. The speakers were all organized around it. It was very intimate, very participatory. Today was our first event that's truly going to be hands-on. It's going to be very much an experiment. We're really excited about doing it, including also we're doing like book talks. So we had our first book talk a few weeks ago. Aaron Kerr, a scholar on the history of AECO and kind of incorporation, the emergence of the architectural corporation as a behemoth that is shaping practice in the world. But taking a step back, and Shin's going to talk more about this, is a couple of years ago we had our first major symposium, which was, we didn't realize how hard it'd be to do. It became a 7-hour event, really looking at AI+A, the future of architectural practice. It was a full-day Saturday event, multiple panels, looking at how AI was being applied to architectural practice in that moment. We were really not very interested in projecting more than 6 months in advance. Everyone who came had to actually talk about how their firms, how their practices were using it then, because obviously the half-life of this is changing on a quarterly basis.
And this was one of, I think, the first AI-focused events on architecture, and that happened here.
So that then was very successful. We then kind of went off and were looking at these other topics for a while, but this year the committee came back, spearheaded by Shin, by Dennis, and some others in the committee. They did a series of what we call AI Salons, and they'll talk more about that, which was really building over the course of the year, examining the applications of AI to architecture, building and kind of culminating in this event today. Where we realized ultimately the best way to really learn about what AI is doing to architecture and impacting architecture and design practice today is roll up your sleeves and actually play with it and experiment with it as opposed to just talking about it. So that's what today is all about. Just to plug what's going to come up next, looking forward, we're starting to set the programming for the next year. Blank slate, there's lots of opportunity to basically create programming both relating to AI technology and other topics. why we're saying anyone who's interested in joining us, get involved now, because we're going to be basically planning this in the moment. Just as a teaser, one of the first events we're going to do early in January, it's going to be actually looking at, as a teaser slide, like the whole question of professionalization, deprofessionalization. You've probably been following what's happening in the news right now about the education department and classification of programs in schools, but that's going to be a springboard for a real, which should be an exciting, critical conversation about the status of architecture as a profession. Andrew, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and so this is, for those of you who are not aware, the federal government is proposing to delist architecture, engineering, and nursing, and a bunch of professions of their professional status, for now, at least at the education department, as it pertains to student loans. The licensure, as most of you know, is governed by the states, but this could be the beginning of a bigger issue. So this is rapidly coming together, and we're going to try to bring in some fairly big people to talk about this and to deal with it, or to discuss how to deal with it. And in the spring, it's not announced yet, there will be a comment period for these new laws, and we're going to try to have this event ideally around that comment period so we can educate everyone about the issue, and then if you choose to do something about it, you'll have the ability to write to your senator, your congressman, or something like that. So this is kind of a response with an action at the end. Still coming together. It may be January, it may be February, it depends when we can get everything together and when the response period is. So these are, again, the types of things. We're also looking to hopefully continue our AI Salons quarterly and try to make this year-end wrap-up that we're doing today an annual event. So again, we would love your participation, ideas, if you like what you're seeing here, to make that happen.
Yeah. So without further ado, we're going to hand it off. Just before we launch into the event, we want to extend our thanks. None of this would happen without the support of the AI New York Center for Architecture, in particular, Next, Salon here, who are really essential in making these events come together, and so many others. So thank you. And also to our sponsors, BR Construction Group and D5 Render, who really are making this programming not just today, but throughout the whole year possible. So with that, we're going to hand over.
Tables, and please go talk to them and see what they're up to. Again, this is a place all about them.
Yeah, so let's hand over the mic to Shinru, and let's get started. All right. Well.
I probably need to use the mic because I don't think I can speak that loud for that long. So yeah, I want to welcome everyone again to join us, especially on the Code Saturday, for the last event of this year-long AI+A series. Before we jump into the workshop, again, I want to thank all the sponsors. So this event is sponsored by D5 and BR. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, this event is sponsored by D5 and BR Constructions. So D5 is a rendering tool. I'm also a lawyer user. If you are doing renderings in your day jobs, feel free to talk with them and check out their tool. There's AI-enabled rendering solutions. And BR Constructions works on high-end commercial and residential projects. So yeah, feel free to talk to them.
Sorry.
Okay, so before we jump into today's conversations about AI for everyone, I want to take a moment to pause, reflect, and share what we have been doing in the past 2 years, what we've learned about around the conversation about AI. So take it as a year in. Sorry, I'm not going to use the mic.
Yeah, don't use it.
Take it as a year in review. Well, actually, it's more like 2 years since we started the kickoff meeting in 2024. So our collective exploration started as early as 2023. As many of us clearly remember, that's a year when ChatGPT became mainstream. And we organized AI+A symposium in December, bringing practitioners, academics, and also software providers together to talk about what they were doing back then, engaging AI in their work. And a year later, in September last year, we had a AI Salon kickoff meeting, which is a planning effort. We bring mostly like academics from different backgrounds to kind of reflect and
ask bigger questions. What is the critical AI topics that AEC industry should be engaged? And that informs us and helps us launch this year-long AI+A series. So we so far organized 3 events. First on value, second environmental intelligence, and the third one is happening. It happened in this September, Dreaming with AI. So for the first half of the years, we had 2 events: value versus values and environmental intelligence. Each focus on different lens about the subjects of AI in the AEC. The core is to bring an interdisciplinary team within the AEC field. So we had engineers, designers, contractors, product providers together share their insight. And the second half of the years, we had already 1 event, Dreaming with AI, in which we go beyond AEC, explore bring people from creative field at large, talking about how they use AI in the creative process. And the last event is today's event, which is the last event of the year, which we shift the gear, kind of focus more on hands-on and try to actually demystifying AI and allow everyone to be able to get access to the tool. So I also want to take a moment to show gratitude. So in the past 2 years, we are trying to bring people from practice, academia, and industry in dialogue, talking about these critical issues. And it's a truly interdisciplinary group. So I want to express my sincere gratitude to everyone who joined. I think some are showing up today. Feel free to talk to them. We also hope to continue this effort in the future, kind of revisit what they have been doing after that conversations and see the evolvement of their work. So let's take a closer look of the event. This is the event I think Jacob and Andre was talking about, like the first AI+A Salon series. As you see the agenda, we try to bring people from practice, software, and research together in dialogue and mostly examine what they're doing at the moment. And the result of that was taken to the kickoff meeting. So this is the first kickoff planning meeting, in which we asked 3 questions. First is, what do they see as the critical topics in the AEC, in AI and AEC? And what they were currently exploring and experimenting, and what they see as emerging challenges and events and activities. So we split the group into 2 sort of focus. The first is more tactical and computer science focused. What you're seeing is a mural board of all of the notes and comments that we organized, like noted during the events. And the second group focused more on the practice of AEC and the theory about it. So after a day-long conversation, several topics consistently surfaced. The first is good data set in AEC. So what does good data mean in the industry? And how do we deal with like fragmented, inconsistent, and unstructured data? The second is interoperability, which is not a new question, it's an old friend to us. However, AI does make it more urgent. As data is central, interoperability is fundamental. We also examined the question about ontologies, because AI pushes to question, raise the fundamental questions. What is the domain knowledge of AEC, and how should it be structured? And lastly, but not the least, is the right range of AI use cases. So we discussed ranging from the bespoke tool to standardized platform, like how AI can help design in different phases and different steps. So as you already see, these questions are not new. Many have been under the focus for decades. However, we do believe AI shines a new light and potentially introduce a new approach to these old problems. So after that planning meetings, we organized and launched this year's AI Salon series. So the first one is value versus values. We hosted in March. We asked deceptively simple questions. What is the value of AI? And the panelists come up with some great thoughts. So I'm going to summarize it. In terms of values, we can understand it in twofold. One is the strategic and the fundamental values. AI potentially enables architectures, transform it from a static object to a dynamic systems that's affected by or defined by data, network, and machine automation. These potentially shape the core DNA of architecture and building, and could entail lots of added value. And the second is, of course, the more practical side, the quantitative, financial, operational value. So panelists from engineering, constructions, and design were sharing how they were actively implementing AI and see how it improved efficiency, schedules, and risk mitigations, and more. There are also questions raised in the conversation, such as the standards versus project-specific data is actually tied to how large versus small firms operate. And we agree there's no winners, and each has their own advantages. And we also see there's a gap between 2D to 3D. Back then, AI models lack spatial understandings, and that's real issues, and we need to address it. And of course, there is a white elephant in the room. The elephant in the room. What is the fee? So I want to share a quote. I think that's a quote by Charlie. It's basically comparing to expedited shippings. Why are we paying more for expedited shipping, but when we are able to deliver project faster, it kind of leads to a lower fee, ironically. There's no easy answer to that question, but I think it pushes us to think deeper, or look into a deeper issue that we may need to rethink the core value of our professional service in order to unlock or get the true value of AI. And of course, there are other really great insights, such as the transition from the master builder, which is more top-down, to more horizontal hive-mind collaboration in terms of how we should work with AI. And then it moves to the second event, which we hosted in May, about environmental intelligence. In this event, we extend beyond architecture, but focus on the built environment at large. And one insight, which I think is extremely great, is AI potentially allows us to extend the scope of work beyond handover to continuous operations, performance, and adaptations. So the panelist was consist of designers, again, engineers, product providers, and real estate. And they share their take on that comment, like how they see it's being possible from their perspective. They also raised other open questions, such as like how could AI address the black box of existing buildings? And what's the tension between data and autonomy and human control? And also, like, how can we address the skill gaps now, as AI is being a critical part of the process? So again, I want to share a quote in terms of how, like, in the scenario that AI enable us to go beyond this project handover, the one thought is, what if the scope of architects somehow persists into the actual operations and ongoing life of this building? So it will potentially be an extension of our service and having an ongoing relationship with clients. And there are other questions and discussions about, like, regarding value. What is the core value of the business? One idea is instead of design, it's actually setting up the logic. And that's March to September, which when we hosted the third event, Dreaming with AI. So in this event, we intentionally tried to go beyond AEC and bring people from the creative field at large. And we were asking questions how they work with AI in their creative process. So I want to share some great insight. One is kind of, again, tying back to the value. The shift of initial value, which is based on labor, to a boundary value framework, which is based on setting up the rulebook, constraints, and the system. So that's proposing a solution or an answer to what will be the new value of our core professional businesses. They also talk about, like, our expertise as a new medium, and kind of reiterate the idea of redefining the new value, saying it's not changing, AI is not making the work less. Instead, it's changing the type of work. It's changing the type of effort. So here are some quotes from that event. The new effort involves potentially navigating the probabilistic systems and developing intuitions for a new medium and increasing the non-deterministic outcomes. That could potentially be the new skill sets that we have to acquire in order to get ourselves prepared for the AI time. We also talk about sort of what will be the AI aesthetic. I think Andrew was sharing the diffusion of aesthetic, and potentially in the near future we may encounter a saturation point of sort of AI aesthetic and changing sort of what the standard beauty or imagery is. And yeah. So I think that's the overall sum of the events. So what's after? After we had the first event, the second and the third. So we did some studies and kind of organized some thoughts. Here are 4 main takeaway points. However, I encourage everyone in the room to challenge or contemplate, see whether it resonates with your experience and whether you have objections or what you feel uncomfortable about it. So here are the 4 points. I'm going to just quickly introduce, and then I'm going to invite Dennis. We're going to go through each point and kind of have conversations. And meanwhile, you guys are free to just raise questions and sort of engage yourself in the conversation. So the first key takeaway is architecture as dynamic intelligence system. The second is data as a new medium. The third is AI as collaborator. And the last one is from discrete to ongoing engagement. So Dennis, do you want to join me? Let's see. Am I able to advance the slides?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
What we doing?
So we will go through each of the points. These are some of the quotes from the panelists. And I also want to encourage everyone to kind of share whether this resonates with your experience, and probably also unfold what does each of the takeaway mean.
So just before we, because I'm going to disrupt.
No worry.
Okay. So how many of you do not use? I want to find out how much AI, in the broadest sense, is impacting your professional work. So I'm going to start with 0 and then 10% go. So how many of you are not using AI at all professionally? Okay. Okay. 10% of your time, are you working hand in hand with AI? 25? 50? 75? Wow. 100? Good. Okay, so yeah, I mean, and I think what we want to do is figure out, the bigger picture takeaways from that, and also where it's going. But I'm sure if you spun back 2 years, the answer would probably be a lot closer to 0 or 10. So that's helpful to get started. So we're talking about architecture as dynamic intelligent systems. I think the point here is that there's a sense that to think about buildings as objects is probably not as relevant. I mean, to think of them as static, right? I always say the dumb boxes where interesting things happen. But I wonder if that is still true. And clearly, the ability for AI to become a part of the world around us and to be part of an ongoing development of a project, I think those possibilities disrupt that idea of that. So when we think of buildings as being intelligent systems, the point is there's a lot of systems in buildings. They're increasingly becoming intelligent. The processes of developing these systems is becoming intelligent. And I think there's this loop, right, between the intelligence of generating design and the intelligence that gets embedded into the buildings as they become these quasi-intelligent environments. Am I missing anything here?
No, and another thing I I want to add is I think it's parallel to the evolution of AI as we see like things like MCP, which allows AI to control more like tools and actually be more proactive. I think this is sort of responding to that as well compared to the prior AI time. With AI, like different endpoint, like Internet of Things, could potentially react to the whole system more proactively. So what? Oh, I just want to like encourage everyone. Like,
so does that resonate with you guys? I mean, who has an experience? Wait, does that resonate at all? Okay, so who has some experience with this sort of aspect of AI? Is anybody working with IoT or sensors or intelligent building energy strategies? Tara? Okay. What would be an example?
She just mentioned MCP. I think that's a very exciting platform to control the feature of the software.
Do we know what people heard of MCP? Okay, it's I think it's a kind of an obscure acronym that stands for Model
Context Protocol.
Yeah, but the idea is that it's a standard way for things that are not AI to be interacted with AI. So you could think of it as a way that AIs can hit things like building control systems, etc. So if you put this little MCP wrapper around other things, then AIs can. There's this whole idea of like agentic AI, which is the idea that AIs can now become our agents, our proxies, and do stuff on our behalf.
Yeah. Another comment I want to add is, which is a topic we want to investigate next year, is how, like for instance, other building topologies such as data center, which is heavily rely on the systems of sort of optimized controls, and that's actually an example of building as a system. It is not in our residentials or like everyday other topologies. So I think maybe the front end of this trajectory may realize a niche building topology such as data center or hospital. And I'm not sure if any of you are like working on project in that field, or if you experience something like that, or hear the client's interest of incorporating AI or more advanced sort of technology in order to make building perform better. No?
Yeah, well, I just thought the ultimate example of the dumb box where interesting things happen, right? Nothing's dumber as architecture than data center, and yet digitally, that's where all the investment, that's where everything's happening right now, is built in these dumb boxes. So I think it's kind of also interesting as our lives become more and more digital, like how does architecture shift? How does it not become just the beige kind of like interface for digital transactions? It's just, when you said dumb box where interesting things happen, I don't think we're heading away from that, like by just connecting them digitally. Sure.
Should we go?
Yeah.
What's next?
Oh yeah, the next is from discrete to ongoing engagement. Yeah, and this we want
Okay, so the sense here, and again, this is I think maybe aspirational, is that so let's face it, architecture, the practice of architecture takes a fairly narrow role in the lifetime of the building, right? I think if architects are involved in the generation of intelligence in the environment, there creates the possibility of architects sticking around longer, or architecture getting feedback from the world. And I think there have been examples of firms who have tried to sort of wind up with what in the tech world is called a stickier relationship to clients, right? You don't just do one building, leave and then hopefully win the next bid with the same client. But there's some sort of ongoing relationship to the client, to their facilities, to their ways of working, right? That are beyond this kind of schematic through CA, right? And so it feels like AI agents can be partners in establishing that reprioritization of architecture beyond just producing documents, but they're just a part of the longer life cycle of of the engagement. There may be other manifestations of that. I guess a follow-up question is like, does AI change the relationship between architects and the collaborators? And, I think we, in the BIM world, we always saw the possibility of BIM extending the reach of architecture somehow into the supply chain, which I think has turned out to be true and false. But I think AI gives us potentially another crack at, like, how do we engage with owners and constituents and even people in buildings. Does that resonate with anybody? Is anybody seeing changes? Are there any discernible changes to practice that you guys are seeing in terms of relationships between architects and clients, or architects and users, or I guess the rest of the team? Is anything changing about roles and responsibilities, what we do, what other people do?
Well, I can share some. I felt like, because I forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Sing Liu. I'm an architect and also design tech focused on integrating AI for corporate architecture. So although it's not reflected at the moment, but you will see what architecture firms hiring is shifting. So there are lots of big architecture firms hiring for data scientists, and they're caring more about data. So I think there are lots of groundwork, especially like recently everyone heard about AECO. Anyone from AECO? Kind of acquired AI startup. I think that's a big change because AECO is a public company, so it reflects what is the market expectations of what our AEC industry should do, or how we should sort of actively engage AI. But I guess for small business, it will be a different case. I felt like different client relationship may transition into a different form of that ongoing relationship. Maybe is kind of doing more consultancies to your client, or providing kind of maybe like pay like subscription-based service that since you now have like if you are able to have a good data set of your clients, then you can potentially recycle things from now on. But yeah, all of those are projections. I'm curious, anyone have any thought if there is an ongoing relationship with client, what would that be?
Anybody applying data? I think it's another topic. Applying data as a skill or an asset in engagement with clients. Yes.
We have a project ongoing right now. It's applying data into Revit with a whole bunch of 450 buildings in a sense. So we're going through a lessons learned of, well, we did it kind of the manual way. How would we have done it next time? With either AI or with, I've been using a lot of Hyper scripts that are coded through AI.
A lot of what?
Hyper scripts.
Hyper, okay.
Yeah, to code it through AI, or like what other software that has been created to create areas and information in Revit. So we're working on that.
Feedback then, Charlie. Yeah.
Yeah, so on our end, we're looking at some of our institutional clients, also that are repeat clients, and trying to understand space utilization. When they come to us for proposals, does it actually need to be X amount of rooms? Does it really need to be that big, or does the program need to shift based on what their utilization rates and things like that? So we are taking, in some instances, we are taking a somewhat of a data approach and having those discussions to really deliver a project that would be of better utilization to them.
How do you know what their use is today?
We do get some metrics from them, especially when you're dealing with, for example, hospitals and educational institutions. The educational institutions are kind of easy because there's courses, there's enrollment, things to that effect, right? So
That assumes the students show up for class.
Exactly, assuming students show up for class, right? And then with hospitals, it gets a little, healthcare gets a little trickier, but there is some data from them that we do ingest. try to sift through.
Any other? Keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going. So the next one I think is very similar to the previous one of kind of what powers the ongoing relationship. It's using data as the new design medium.
I guess we started. I guess we really covered that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think we kind of covered already, like what will be the new data and sort of the utilizations, energy performance, and many more. Let's just keep going to the last point then. I think this is kind of something that actually tied together to today's workshop, is AI as collaborator. I want to share some quotes from the past panelists. So there are different ways of how this collaboration would be. So one is saying like the rise of the bespoke temporary tools allows designers to be free from being defined by our tools. Some of you are probably going to do something like that today because with AI, you'll be able to kind of create a more customized tool instead of constrain or rely on tools provided to execute your ideas and design intentions. And second quote is, what I'm realizing is that it's like having a council of advisors, and there's a whole suite of different platforms and different tools. I think this is position us either as curators or orchestrators, empowering us with a wide range of tools. I think like AI, one feature of it is to provide actual knowledge and that we typically in the old time takes longer to acquire. But you have to know how to master or like how to control the tool. Maybe not master it, but be able to know what tool to do what is critical. And another quote is, I think that's from the first panel, is it's a shift from the single master builder, and what we're talking about here is that type of mind master builders. I think the key there is actually talking about the traditional master builder is very top-down kind of structures. But with AI, the type of mind master is more horizontal in terms of how we collaborate and work because the tools, the AI agent will have more agencies and potentially proactively collaborate with them. And the last thing is about our role as architects or designers is shifting towards collaboration with multiple entities. I think this is similar to the previous one. The entities, in this case, it could be human, it could be non-human. So AI as part of the resource. Do you have other things to add?
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, the question about kind of what are the metaphors for how we work in collaboration with these intelligent machines is the kind of what we're throwing out there. I have a personal experience which isn't from architecture, but is from software development. So in software development, in commercial software development, there's two major roles. One is what's called product manager and one's development manager. So the product manager goes out into the world and figures out, meets with prospective customers, whatever, figures out what needs to be developed and then goes back and tells the development manager what to do. And I have done both roles, but I am finding that when I do engage in software development, which we'll do shortly, it's like having a software development team of like 6. And I don't really code anymore. I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm just telling the AI what I want. And frankly, it's a lot, while there are limits, it's a lot easier to tell one AI what to do than tell 6 software developers what to do. So that's one kind of role. I think, I don't know exactly how that translates to architecture and if it does today. I think this other idea that you have a team of like the world's greatest with some limitations consultants at your fingertips, and you can instantly get to information, synthesize the information that you need in a way that, again, I mean, I feel like I'm trashing engineers and I don't need to do that, although I think that's the risk that always. But yeah, the ability to rapidly get any information you want and have it synthesized and fed back to you. That's a remarkable thing. What I think is an open question is, what if we each have one of those and we're still trying to coordinate with each other? What is that distributed team going to look like? Will it be a central AI? Will there be distributed AI, does it even matter how it's kind of architected? But I guess, those are the questions that I think are really, so both from a cultural, work culture perspective, but also clearly from billings and revenue and, how we figure that out is going to be everything about what we are as professionals. I mean, for me, I think it's a net positive, but I can see it not being that. So, are there thoughts about that collaborative model that we're missing? Where any other kind of metaphors or experiences that epiphanies on how this is changing work?
I think what I've been seeing is that there's people that are not as comfortable with AI because they don't know where to start, but they're also starting somewhere with one chatbot that maybe another person isn't so comfortable using. They start using another chatbot. So as you can see, there's Copilot, there's Gemini, whatever. And I've realized that there's another type of person also, which I guess I'm more this third person, which is I've been collaborating with different chatbots with the same information. So one chatbot gets to a point where it's the limit, and then I pass the information on to this next chatbot. So it made me think when you said about collaborating, it made me think about how we start passing on information to humans and how then we bring input into it as AI that we're more comfortable with, and then re-export it and pass on the information back and forth.
So we're supposed to use the microphone that doesn't work, so you can't hear us this way.
It's working out.
Oh,
I guess you have to use
Yeah.
Thinking about using collaborative with instead of using so that is where we use collaborative with. We use it.
So 75% of you, sorry, most of you use AI 50 to 75% of the time. So what do you do? And what is that relationship like? Is it just one-to-one? Is it prompt and you ask a question, it tells you something, or is there more to it?
You have to talk directly into it as well. Yeah.
So I think
It sucks, but
it's designed to
Look like so this collaboration, it's human sounding phrases, and the language that is used is made to look like this collaboration. But I think we are essentially using the system to get something and take that data and then use it as another question. So I have this collaborating gives it as agency, which I don't agree with. I'm not. Yeah.
I also want to raise another kind of potential debate topics because across the panels, I think people have different ideas of how the future of sort of the profession or the future of creative process would be. One biggest one is, are we going to have generalists or are we going to have specialists? For instance, I think in the last panel, Monumental Labs, which is a fabrication, do customized sculpture fabrication, talk about their teams. They hire domain experts, people who know a lot, vertical knowledge of specific domain, and they just give them all kind of AI tools. So these domain experts will be sort of adding their superpower with AI and become sort of more versatile. We also hear a completely different case, which is sort of celebrating more on the generalists. So instead of domain experts, you kind of know a little of everything, and AI kind of help you to get a little bit deeper into all different aspects. I don't really know whether which one is better, but I felt like maybe in different field, different modes works better. I'm curious if you have to identify yourself. Do you see yourself as more like domain experts and potentially get more AI power, or do you see yourself as more like a generalist? Yeah, Andre.
I mean, just in terms of low-hanging fruit, I've started more and more to use it to help dealing with finding specific code references. So rather than spending the time to do it, which I know how to do, and I do all the time, and it's annoying and time consuming, it helps me get there faster to figure those things out, or to find some of those like needles in a haystack references in the code. I find that very helpful. I mean, that's sort of the easier thing because it's all text-based, obviously, but it is very helpful.
Yeah, but you do know how to evaluate whether the
Yes.
result is correct or not, right?
And that's the, sorry, that's the key thing is that like, I don't use it to sort of tell me what the code says, I just use it to help find it because as an architect, you take responsibility. Now, sometimes I've also asked it things and then go to the actual specific text to confirm. But both of those things will save a lot of time and is very helpful.
Has it ever hallucinated a code specification?
I think a couple of times it said it gave some gobbledygook that I just, but it's funny because it does sound like it knows what it's talking about. Like I can't remember the specifics, but it
Possibly.
I was just gonna say, I think what's so interesting about this AI change in work is that it's happening across, like it's happening at the same time from people right out of school engaging it, figuring it out. And because, as we'll see today, the barrier to entry is fairly low, also people with a lot of experience are kind of engaging as well. For my day-to-day work, it's night and day. The people who ask the right questions based on 30 years of experience are using AI in a really supercharged way because they're getting, they're essentially just flattening the amount of time. It's like a huge time saver to get to the answer that they feel would have been right and they have that check. I think the open question for me as I think about it is like, how is this next generation going to develop that deep knowledge, that domain knowledge, when the muscles that they're exercising day to day are very much that of a generalist? So who's going to be asking the really good questions?
Yeah.
So I think we're in a sweet spot, weirdly enough. Technology-wise, we may not be anywhere near what AI can achieve, but we still have that generation of like domain experts. Somewhere, I'm a little afraid of 10 years out, where we might be in a little bit of a wishy-washy situation.
Was anybody seeing impacts on hiring at any level, particularly the softening of early stage, early career hiring? I don't think that's hit our industry yet. And I think, sorry, was there a comment?
Actually,
Yeah.
to get hired, I used AI heavily for my resume.
Yeah.
And not to create the resume, but to get past the, what's it called?
The AI
screening.
filtering of
The
resumes.
filtering that happens in companies because that sometimes you don't know how to get past it. And if you can get past it with AI, that's how you do it. You get a percentage out and I go really deep in, you get a 90% assurance they got it.
So is anybody, okay, binaries, anybody, well, three. Anybody seeing lessening of opportunity, the same, no change, or more opportunity for you through this? I mean, you're sort of saying.
I think it's more opportunity because I have a memory issue, and I think like what you were saying, you can be an expert, but you still take time to try and figure out what it is that you know, but AI can tell you quickly in 2 seconds the information. You can just say, oh, yeah, because I'm an expert already, I know more or less like what if this is right or wrong. So it just depends. It's like you kind of go from expert to generalist and expert again.
I want to share an anecdote from the other industry, the AI computer science industry. Recently, there was a very ironic disaster. So anyway, it was a leak of information and it reveals 20% of the AI paper, the research paper is actually written by AI. And some of the data is actually hallucinated. So I think this threat is beyond our field. And I think, but we can take some proactive measure to figure out how do we hire, how do we train the younger generations to get themselves prepared and actually be able to carry on the domain experts from the previous generations. I don't have the answer, but I think it's a very important topic to discuss.
So that is VTLs like an actual word?
No. Yes.
All right. So anyway, these are case in point. I don't know,
Yeah.
but that's never the case. Okay, so I guess, what we want to do from here is just a couple things. First of all, I mean, the goal of this session is sort of to mark where we've come in the last 2 years, which has been sort of fumbling into the future without knowing where it's going. And the more important, I think, agenda is to figure out, to get some ideas and some engagement about where we go next. So, okay, so.
Yeah, so I listed some of our ideas of what we need to do next to continue facilitating the conversation, such as to talk about the real practice, the elephant in the room, like how it affects the practice model, whether there's new emerging practice model showing up, how it affects the fee. Are we charging more or less? Are we getting paid, more or less? And how it affects the labor, like hiring new people. What are the new roles that need to be? And more debates. I think we just kind of mentioned briefly that, for instance, the generalist versus specialist, which is a direction we should move towards. And also want to have more sharing. So if you know some people in your friend zones who are actively engaged in AI in their practice, we are very happy to include them to kind of do a sharing. That's the only way we can move forward to know how everyone's doing and using the tool. And more reflections. I think we're thinking maybe some sort of ways to document all of the discussions, and more workshops. And what else? That's open questions. Anyone have any thoughts, or if you want to be kind of helping this, what's your opinions or thought about this? Yeah.
I don't have an opinion, but I have a question. I'm sure I'm not the first person to wonder this. Is, we talk about, are we collaborating with AI or are we using it? There's also the question, is AI collaborating with us or is it using us? We're training AI, okay? And if you think about, I don't care, I'm not an architect, I don't care if you're an architect or an artist or a baker. If you're using AI to do your work, we're training AI to be more valuable to other customers who might be competing with you. So you need to kind of think about that as well. And I don't have an answer, but I just want to say that.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
What can this committee do to help you guys, people, your bosses, the profession? Have we captured the broad brushstrokes of what's going on? Are we missing key things?
I guess I'm worried about students coming out of college now and having, already the firm I used to work at, OBA, we rarely hired out of college anyway because of lack of, employable skills. So they got a couple of years under their belt, and just, what's the role of the profession to ensure that we're bringing, new students into the professional pool, and what that process looks like. Yeah, the students are coming with AI training, but they don't have any of the industry experience to know they're generating something valuable or it's AI Salon. What does that look like? How do you ensure that they're given value or promoted so that it's not just, like firms waiting around for employees to come with 5 years experience that can be implemented, into the workflow?
Yeah, my career has been focused on, for lack of a better term, digital design practitioners, and there has been an early career role for specialists in that field. I think there's some people, some of you in the room that may not, the long-term career opportunities for digital design specialists is kind of, doesn't seem to be a career track to mid, the number of CTOs that emerge of architecture practices that started as digital practitioners is small, right? So, but at least that gave early, it felt like a career accelerator early in to do that, right? I have the same question. which is, first of all, I mean, that was the question, is anybody seeing changes in hiring yet? But certainly other professions this is happening. And very much that point about, if young people can't acquire the skills to be able to ask the questions of AI to get the results, then how the hell does this work?
There's also a question here. Yeah.
In that regard,
Can you speak
maybe.
louder?
Yeah. I recently was at the AI Summit in Hudson Yards, and one of the scenarios they spoke about using AI is more like as role playing and as practice. So instead of questioning, it's like, okay, students coming out of college, how is AI broadening their core skills? How can we use AI as creating these scenarios, these virtual environments, these gamified environments to reinforce skills that employers want to see in new hires in a very safe and codified environment that has no risk on clients. So maybe taking more time to train people from the get-go in these environments to help them acquire skills much faster than they would have on the job itself.
Yeah, so for training, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, it's really a good one. I have a quick anecdote, which is this semester I'm teaching an entrepreneurship and architecture class, and to third-year students who most don't even know what architects do, let alone the possibilities of other sort of careers, professions, etc. And I got them to do, financial pro formas for real estate or, software development. I mean, stuff they would never do. It would take 2 years of business training to get you to the point where you could do this. And I think, that is, to me, that was very interesting, that you can accelerate people, because it was like, how do you even learn that stuff, and you just ask AI and you iterate, right? So I do think you're right. There's probably some sort of, what do you want to call it, synthetic experience that maybe could be an answer to some of this.
The simulation.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, I just want to ask, in response to some of this, I feel like these conversations still feel to me a little bit like the debates over the transition from hand drawing to computer drafting sometimes, right? I'm very skeptical of that language when that comes up, so I'm very curious to see, maybe something will come out through the days, how is this fundamentally different in real life? Which it is, I think. But also, a lot of smacks of the debates over when Google became really prevalent. People were like, oh my God, you can find anything, but how do you know if it's verified? Not even Google search, but just the internet. So I'm actually not that worried about younger generations coming up, because so much of what architects actually do is, first of all, if it's the wrong answer, you're going to learn very quickly because it's going to fall apart in the field, right? And that's where architecture ultimately bumps up against the reality of physical realization, and that's honestly how we already learn anyway. Nobody learns in school how to be an architect. You kind of, school is something else, which is very much a debate about what's the point of architecture school. I'm saying this as an educator too, but I think that's perpetually been a question, right? I don't know, just these are questions that are coming to my mind after this conversation we're having, right? But also, I think we should give credit to, students coming out that they went into it because they want to design. And I'm not so worried about, people cheating using AI to do things that they were doing in the first place. They went into it because it's self-expressive, So would it be a bad thing if students, younger architects, just used these new tools to basically fast track all the things that they never went into architecture to do in the first place? Is that a problem? I don't know. Maybe we need fewer architects, but I think there's a whole question of do we need as many architects as we have to begin with? And that's a separate question. How many architects do we really need? And that gets into issues of elitism and all kinds of other stuff, but we'll park that for a second. But anyhow, just throwing out a few unorganized thoughts to contribute to the discussion. I see your hands up. Yeah.
I think we're talking about iteration and just the role of production in the architectural project, which is typically where younger staff came in, right? They're responsible for production of, ideas that had already been generated elsewhere. And that's where you develop your skills, is by producing. Now production is becoming the easiest part of the equation.
Right.
And asking the question is harder. And so, again, I'm going back to the same idea. So how do you, it's not through generating AI slop iteratively. Iteration was always kind of the hallmark of quality design work firms that iterated more were always better. I think with AI, iteration is absolutely table stakes and very cheap. So like I think it is a real quandary, is how do we decide quality, how do we learn it through doing, if doing is so easy?
Sure. It also gets to the fundamental structural issue with like architecture today, which is, we conflate, and this is something that happened in the US, like post World War II really, is that draftspeople and architects became the same person,
thing as we're cheap,
which was very much like a deliberate, right? There's a whole history of that, right? Of the unionization movement of draftspeople in the 20s and 30s, and then in the US after World War II, everyone became architects. It's also a way of diffusing like a unionization movement, because you no longer had labor and management. You had, everyone became various stages of becoming Franklin, right? But the role of the draftsperson never went away, but which your point, I think, was maybe like a lot of some of these tasks that are becoming very doable by actually roles that were not really initially the role of the quote architect person at the top. But maybe it was this question like how many draftspeople did we need?
Yeah, going back to your CAD, just real quick, just to touch back on the CAD thing that you brought up. That was an interesting shift in the profession when all of a sudden younger generation were actually better at doing it. So it's in a strange thing, this idea of production making things.
And I wanted to bring back to an idea I think is surfaced across the panel discussion, like what is the new value? And I think people touch on different parts, and I just want to kind of highlight it again. It's a value of not labor, but actually the logic, like setting up the rule and constraints. I think in today's workshop, we're going to see that as well, instead of actually doing the coding or whatever. It's about like knowing the steps, knowing like the workflow, and understanding that. And the labor of actually realizing that will be done with the assistance of AI. I think they have a comment here.
When I first decided to be an architect, my father was friendly with Dick Roth in a long architectural family, Harry Roth and sons that built stuff all over the city. And I went to see him, and his advice was get construction jobs. You will not learn this in school. You will not learn this in office. But you will be able to talk to the people who are actually going to build the stuff that you're thinking of. I did, and I think that was very valuable, and I've not heard anybody say anything about that. About getting a construction job.
I actually did. How many got a construction job along the way?
Well, a few of them, yeah.
I mean, there is this, I think this is also fiction, but that plumbing will be the last thing standard, That's very true.
Just a quick comment. I mean, first off, I totally agree. I never understood waterproofing until I did it myself, and then it was totally obvious. But when you're drawing it, it doesn't always make sense. So, but I mean, if you can take that hands-on knowledge and merge that with an AI powered skill set, that would be incredibly powerful. And I think that the one comment I just wanted to make that, between Jacob and Nick was saying earlier is that, I think especially when you're younger, you don't quite realize that there's a lot of slog in the work of being an architect that is totally not what we thought we were signing up for. And I think that's one of the potential really positive things, which I think is what Jacob was touching on, is that it may allow us to focus more on the design work and to doing the things that we actually, why we became architects, rather than getting lost in this huge black hole of all of this other stuff. Especially in a place like New York, where it's incredibly complicated, there's a lot of laws and regulations and things that you can just get buried in. And maybe this will also help improve the quality of work in the city or other complicated places to work. So I think that's also one of the things that hopefully we'll start seeing.
Yeah. And I'm just going to end this wrap up or year in review with this quote. It says, for designers navigating this new landscape, the advice is to actively engage with it and also kind of like try and break it and see where the limits are. So that's what we're going to do today with AI for Everyone workshop. So from that, we are going to introduce the instructors and what each of the workshop is. I think the first is Richard is here. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Hi, I am Foster. I am currently a MS student with case at RPI, but I got there kind of the long way. I've got over several decades of design leadership, design director, and a number of roles. A few years ago, I left that and started my own consultancy where I'm really focused on design technology. I do a lot of charrette facilitation and improved work facilitation. I've also been teaching. A lot of the work you see up here is work that my students have been doing. So we've been exploring how technology works in communication and how we kind of explore these emerging technologies. So my workshop, on workshop number 1, is an intro to AI-assisted creative coding. I kind of shy away from the word vibe coding because I don't think architects vibe anything. Right? We're extremely specific about everything we do. Even if we start with like a general idea, like we work it to death, right? So I kind of really shy away from the word vibe coding. Initially, this was pitched as a processing course. I'm not going to do processing. I'm going to do 3JS. So we've got a lot more capability with it. That said, we're still going to focus on 2D kind of graphic work as well as some application, really minimal stuff to kind of get you in and hopefully get you some things you can come out of it and build some confidence, but have a platform that you can continue to grow from. So that's what we'll be doing.
And the space is going to be here. So if you're attending the first workshop, you can stay here.
Next slide, my slide.
Yes. Oh.
That's not you.
I think I might.
Okay. I'm Michael Kelly. I'm going to be leading the third workshop, which is the Revit API and Revit automation workshop. So a little bit about me. I'm an architect turned self-taught programmer. I've been in the industry for 30 years. I spent half of that as an architect and the other half as a software developer. Most of my time was spent at Gary Partners in Los Angeles, which is where I met Dennis. And from there, I've been working, currently I'm working as a senior BIM developer for Alteg. Alteg is a company that does infrastructure projects, so we do water, power, renewables. Right now, I'm working on a project we're looking to automate electrical substations, which is about as far as you can get on the spectrum from the work that I was doing at Gary Partners. So it's kind of interesting to see that. I also run a website called ArcSmarter, where I write about technology and productivity for architects. And I have an online course called Revit Academy. You can switch it. What we're going to do today is we're going to be working with a Revit add-in called Launchpad. And Launchpad allows you to write C# code inside of Revit and run it inside of Revit. And this was actually an add-in that I created because teaching people how to use, or teaching architects and engineers how to program C#, it's not a skill set that we always have. There's a lot of set that's required, there's a lot of friction in that process. So Launchpad lets you get in and start coding right away. And when you pair it with an LLM like Claude or ChatGPT, you can generate code like ridiculously fast. So for me, if I'm typing, I'm pretty fast typing. I can do, let's say, 1,000 lines of code in like 2 hours. Using a lot of these tools, you can do that in about 2 minutes. So, and honestly, it codes a lot better than I do. So we're going to be generating a lot of different tools. I'm going to give you some prompts. Launchpad is a platform that has built-in capabilities for user interface. So what's great about it is you can iterate very quickly. You can test things out, try something else and work. And if, in fact, for me as a developer, like it's totally changed the way that I work. So the last year has been super interesting, integrating tools like this.
And your workshop is over here, right? Okay.
Did you say you can write 2,000 lines of code?
I can't write 2,000 lines. Let's take it all day.
Okay, where's my slide?
We had great slides.
Mine's gone.
There might be.
There it is.
We're probably gonna add it after.
It definitely got added. Okay, so I'm Dennis. I have been an architect, engineer, technologist, startup founder. Worked with Michael and quite a few people here at Gary Partners and Gary Technologies back then. I'm currently associate professor At RPI, there's a program called CASE, Center for Architecture Science and Technology in Brooklyn, part of that organization. And so I actually teach, I'm going to call it vibe coding just because it annoys people. Some of the processing stuff that Richard Allen will show you that, oh, you could not use processing. So some of that early stage stuff, I teach a course in that. I also teach a course in Python coding for Rhino. And so that's what we're going to work on in workshop 2. So if you know how to use Rhino, Grasshopper, but don't know how to code it, that's what we're going to do today, and that will accelerate, show you how to accelerate automation, things like that. Along the way, we'll talk about a couple of the major Python libraries under the hood of Rhino. Suffice to say, Rhino is written in its own sort of set of objects and code, and you get exposure to that you can automate. So just imagine kind of lifting up the hood of this thing and plugging into the Spark plugs directly. I'll show you kind of how Rhino works under the hood, and how we can tap into that and some of the major building blocks of Rhino automation.
And your workshop is
if you go all the way to the first floor and see the orange hazard-looking grass thing with needles, go past that, take a right. It's in a big conference room, so just go past the.
It's the far side of the gallery.
Yeah, go that way.
Before we dismiss, just sorry, like just the logistic of the day. So the actual workshop gonna start at 2 p.m. So we have a few kind of breakout time. And we will be back to this room at 4:20. So we're going to share what each of the workshop is producing and what we're doing together here. What about like 10 to 15 minutes? And then we're going to just have just a reception kind of a talk conversations. So that's it. Workshop start at 2.
This is intro to AI assisted coding. I assume you guys are all here for that. You will likely need to get onto the Wi-Fi, so here is the password and the network. You might take a screenshot of that if you need it. I'm going to get this up here for just a second. I'm not going to talk about this a whole lot, these were slides I had up a few moments ago, but what I will say is the way I approach working with AI, I think comes from decades of kind of design leadership, working with a team of individuals on any project. Like one of my favorite things to do as a designer is to collaborate. Like I love to bounce ideas off of people and see where it goes, right? Like you've got a concept, but it's not fully formed. Like that's the wonderful thing about design. Like you never come into it like, I know exactly what this is going to be from day one. Like there's a process of discovery. And so that's the way that I approach working with AI. And that's the way we're going to talk about it here today. And it's also the way I approach working with students, right? Like it is a collaborative process, and it is very much a process of exploration. Which I really want to kind of just emphasize that moving forward. Let's skip that. So these are just a few slides of some of the stuff that I've been doing. I am not a native coder. I've done a lot of experimentation with various technologies throughout my career. I've worked with, I consulted with AECO, I consulted with the Wild, who's now part of Autodesk. I've done some consulting and some facilitation work with TestFit. I love to get in and experiment and try new things and see where they can go. But I'm not a native coder. I've been really getting into this coding for the last 3 months. So what I've done is, so it's really short in terms of like my ramp up to what we're going to talk about today. But I want to emphasize that because it makes it's a really low entry point for anyone here. You don't have to be a coder to get in and start doing some really interesting tests. It really does help if you've got a curious kind of mindset. I've got an assistant here with me today, Hosan Habib. Is a PhD student with CASE. He's a colleague over at RPI. He will be helping us today. When I say helping, as you run into problems, we're probably not going to help you find where your code has got a miss, like something wrong with the syntax. What we will try to help you do is, here are some things that you can do to get yourself out of the ditch and back onto the road, right? Like we're using AI to help us problem solve. When we run into issues, we're gonna give those issues and we're gonna help it help us, right? So he's gonna be here to help us with that, so thank you, Hosan. A couple links. I have a Discord set up today, so if you've got a Discord account, feel free to join it. A number of the links that I'm going to share, I've already posted into the Discord. I've also posted in the Discord a prompt that you can use to start your AI in terms of, I want you to think like a creative coder, and here's the space that I want you to kind of operate in. So I've got that, I've posted it to the Discord. I feel like it was probably the easiest way for me to give that information to you.
I don't know what to do on Discord.
Then it is okay. You don't have to connect to Discord, but if you scan your phone to the QR code, it should pull up a link that opens up Discord. If you've got an account, then it'll let you join that server automatically. Otherwise, it'll ask you to set up an account. Yeah, you can, the easiest way is going to be from here, and then you can go to the Discord site
With the laptop?
with the laptop.
So what am I doing? I'm using my camera like this? I'm sorry,
I've
I'm
tried
a
that
beginner.
before.
So I wanted to put this on here. So
Yeah.
I get this-
Do you have a Discord account?
No, I don't.
Okay. You don't have to have an account. And everything I'm going to share, there may be other ways I can share it as we go along. What I would do is I would try to get to it on your phone, and then you may be able to, we can connect you over to your laptop as we go. Okay. The slides that I'm going to share today, it's a Figma deck. So if you want to follow along or you want to come back and reference it, you can pull them up here. This link is also in the Discord. So that's why I gave you the Discord link first, is because you can always go to this Discord and pull up these links later. And then we are going to be working specifically in a platform called playcode.io /3JS. And this is one of the reasons why I decided to do 3JS today. Initially, I was thinking processing going to P5 because they were self-contained envelope environments, and I don't have to bring you into Visual Studio Code. Playcode makes this really easy, so it gives us a self-contained environment, but it gives us the platform that we can do 3JS. So I think this is a great thing. So go ahead and go to 3JS, or go to playcode.io /3JS, or click on the link here.
What if you can't get onto the Wi-Fi?
Did you?
Yeah, I tried the password.
And that did not work?
And I tried the public one and the production one, neither one worked. Yeah.
Did we mistype it? Did I?
AIANY1.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have trouble getting onto the Wi-Fi?
No, and I used that same password on my phone and it worked.
And it worked, just not on your.
Just not here. Yeah.
That is
That's a tech issue.
That's a tech beyond me issue.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, sure.
If you are on playcode.io, up in the upper right-hand corner, it'll ask you to go ahead and set up an account. You could just log in using your Google account. It's super easy. The reason you want to do that is because it won't actually let you save what you're doing unless you create a free account. And then once you do that, we will when we get into it, you're going to clone the existing project, and that's the space we're going to start working at. Everybody here, I know we're trying to get you online.
Yeah.
Is the gentleman up here able to help us? Sorry.
What is the Wi-Fi?
No, but
That's
not bad.
Yeah. So,
Okay. We will, hopefully we'll get you up.
we have a Wi-Fi issue, and he's gonna try to restart.
Okay, really quick, because I know I've mentioned processing P5 and P.js. So processing in P5, those are their types of JavaScripts. Processing doesn't really play nicely in a web environment. P5 solves some of that, but it is still fairly limited. It's a 2D application. You've got very limited 3D capabilities. So here's a couple examples of things that you can do in processing. You can do some really interesting graphic work and some animations. Just to give you a sense, when people say processing versus these other apps, I want to kind of share those. P5 is somewhat similar. Its capabilities are more sophisticated. It can be plugged directly into an HTML, which makes it a lot easier to do things with. But effectively, imagine it is like processing built to work within HTML. A lot of the stuff that you're doing is still very kind of graphic based. Let's see if there's any of these I want to kind of play with. We got some basic animations, interactions, those sorts of things. People can do some really sophisticated things with both processing and P5. What we are focusing on is 3. So with 3, we can do all the things that we can do in processing in P5, but we can also do a whole lot more. So this is where we're getting to a point where we're building we're no longer just drawing on in the computer. So if you think about P5 and processing, you're basically drawing things like frame by frame, and we're now with 3 able to create entire worlds. So I'll just pull up something here. So here is an entire 3-dimensional world that is fully kind of engageable and interactive, all kinds of effects kind of built into that. So what we can do with 3, you've got a platform that we build on. Let's not try to do any of this today. We won't get there. But I just want to give you a tool set that you can build upon for later. A couple people I follow on LinkedIn, just in the last month, have been doing some really amazing things with Three.js. So I thought I might show you a couple of those. Again, outside the scope of what we're going to try to do today, but pretty sophisticated, just to give you the sense that if you can imagine it, you can probably build it in 3.
Can you just talk about external libraries across the 3 that you just presented? Like, is Three.js, it's more actively developed now, right?
Yes, it is. I think there's a lot more libraries. We're not going to probably pull in a lot of libraries today.
Yeah, just as a concept.
But you've got a lot more, it's a lot more robust. So I think you've got a lot of people building additional libraries and plugins that really extend its capabilities. So this is a fully live rendered model, just playing in the web. It's playing a little slow right there on our Wi-Fi, but fully interactive. That was one. This guy, apparently those are not all. Okay. connected, like, customizable universe, and it's quite impressive what it does. And then the other thing he's been building just this last month, and I wanted to share this because I think it talks about iteration, is he's been building, like every couple of days he shares a new, like, okay, now I've got it to do this thing. He's built this kind of entire, like, water sink. So he's building a engine for rendering water, all inside of Free.js, which is really sophisticated with how sophisticated it is. But every couple of days, he kind of adds new things, and now it's got caustics, and it's got, like, so what I want to iterate about that, or what I want to kind of emphasize about that is iteration, right? We're not going to try to put one ask into ChatGPT and say, I want you to generate a fully fledged, product. I want to start somewhere and I want to build on it. And so that's kind of how, so a couple examples of things where I started just a couple months ago, and some of these are going to be really rough, but I'll show you quickly where we started to kind of build up from. The first project I was kind of exploring was this one up here. I really just wanted to see if I could get AI to generate this pattern. And so here's a couple examples that I created. The first one, not very good, but we're getting somewhere. The second one is better. And then I kind of left that alone, and I decided, well, let me try a different pattern. And what I got was wild. But I didn't explore it too far. So I'm sure I could have iterated on it, but I kind of lost interest really quickly. And decided I'd start exploring this one, which I thought was really kind of interesting. And so I went through a number of iterations, and you could see, starting at this top, that would be what I would consider vibe coding. It's giving me the vibe of where I started, but it certainly isn't where I wanted to be. But you can see each step, each iteration, these were kind of like, I kind of saved my code in batches to kind of show how each one got more and more refined, to the point where I then built this. And then once I got the graphic part done, I thought, well, wouldn't it be really interesting if this was, let me launch that. Let me go here. So wouldn't it be interesting if this was an animation? And so then I started to do this animation, and I thought, and I built in a number of controls, so I could play with how fast it moves. I could play with how dense it is. I built in a number of things where I can control re-roll and those sorts of things. And once I built this, I thought, it's interesting, but it kind of reminds me of cellular automata, right? And so I thought, well, I wanted to do that. I want the colors to start eating each other. And what happens when that does? And so then I built in another thing. And so what you'll see here are the colors start to transfer into the squares next to them. And if I let this run for about 5 to 10 minutes, it will eat each other out. And you'll get to a point where you've got one color left, which is really fascinating to sit and watch. So that was kind of like my kind of launching pad. I'm like, okay, now I've got some things that I'm starting to kind of play with that feel kind of interesting. Then I started to kind of play with this idea of, and I stole this from one of the projects that I worked on. It was a school for a robotics lab. We installed this really expensive lighting system. The idea being like it was IoT and had all this control capabilities, big brain, and it was going to interact with the robotics in some way. It never happened because the STEM teachers never got it to work, so they had this really expensive system. So I just started to kind of play with that idea and think, well, what if I could just prototype? I just was like, okay, let me prototype that, kind of build the space, and then I've got this idea of this robot that's moving, it's changing the colors. That became, started in both of those, started as processing sketches. I then converted them. I had to rewrite all the code to make it work, to turn it into a 3, but these are both now 3. So then I ended up with this. I can turn on my lights. My lights now respond to my robot. As my robot moves, I can control where the robot goes. I can come in here, I can start placing obstacles. So this felt, and I can also kind of change and play with like how many lights sit in the space, all those sorts of things. So I'm trying to kind of build in ways that I can use this as a tool. And so that's part of what I wanted to talk about today was we can do cool graphics, but you can also just start to build yourselves utilities that you may want or need. Then I kind of took this and decided to expand it further. And so that was built natively in processing. I did convert it. Sorry, my website is a little bit finicky. I also built this where my tiles move. But I'm going to jump over in here. And then I converted that entire scene into, this is where 3JS becomes more interesting because now we can have entirely three-dimensional scenes. So I kind of converted my robot space into an animated space. And this took me a little bit of time, probably a day or so or more, like really working through the code. But when it launches, it is generating the tile pattern on its own. So that's another thing you could conceivably just build as a utility that says, okay, I'm going to give you a space and I want you to generate a tile pattern, right? I'm going to give you the tiles that I want and I want you to randomize it by some way. So that's something that you can do. Yeah, so we can come in and completely kind of move around. Our robot is moving. As he changes color, he's changing the color that the lights are. So all these things are kind of tied to each other. I don't have the control built into that yet, but it will be. That's become part of a bigger project that I'm working on, and I'll integrate this into that. So that gets me here. And then I decided to, I'm missing something on this slide. That's okay. So then I decided to make a little utility. And I was kind of inspired by, so I showed you the P5 examples. One of the examples on P5 was this really simple light lerp, or color lerp, which basically is just taking two colors and creating a gradient between them. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Could I turn that into a tool? Because I'm always looking for a way to say, I've got two colors. I want to create a really seamless gradient between it. I want to know how many steps are along that gradient, and I want to pull one of those colors specifically out, right? Like, that's not something I've ever found a really good, reliable tool to do. So I thought, well, let's see if I can just build one. And so, again, this was probably a couple hours of effort to kind of build this tool. But I'm just kind of randomize some colors, but I can specifically come up here and change and pick any color that I want. I can enter my hex code. I can tell it how many steps along the way that I want those colors. I can then also double click on any of these hex codes and I've got that value. So really quickly, I've got myself a utility that helps me solve a problem. And it took me a few hours to code it and kind of work through it. And a lot of this is, as I'm building it, I'm like, okay, well, I got this to work, but now it would be really nice if I could save those colors, right? So I built a way to save those colors, so I can always come back to it. I can randomize another set, save those, and then I can always come back and I can restore this. So a really simple but meaningful little utility.
Was that using 3JS?
That is 3JS. But it can also be done in P5. I think originally I started something in P5, but then I kind of abandoned, I got it to a point where it was working, but then I quickly abandoned it and moved it into 3JS. And so what you're seeing there is you've got kind of a combination of, and this is the nice thing with 3JS, is you've got an interaction between the HTML level, where you've got some user interface tools and dialogues, and then what's happening kind of on the rendering side, and happening within the JavaScript side, kind of within that. And so what I'm working on right now, and the reason I want to show this, I'm building, probably the last couple of weeks I've been building this game. And yeah, let me just watch that real quick. So I think it gives us, full screen real quick. So it's a really simple in-concept game. There's some really challenging kind of complications. Choose a number of players. I'm just going to leave all this kind of as is. The game is basically placing tiles on a board. I'm matching up nodes, so you can see the existing tile that was on the board. I've got some dark gray nodes. What I'm looking for is to match up nodes on this tile with that tile. Where nodes match up, they become hot. Where they don't, they kind of die. As I start adding more and more tiles, it starts to build connections. And then it starts to develop a scoring system for how those connections work. And it starts, this is where getting the scoring for this to work was really, really complicated. Like in my mind, it made a lot of sense, but getting the code to generate it took a bit of effort. Like I got stuck in a loop. Me and my AI, who've been best friends for over years, had a tense time. But we're better now. I know you're concerned. But the way that I got to resolve it was that AI is really, really smart. I started to take screen grabs of what I was getting, and I start marking them up. So I've done a lot of work with renderers over the years, where I'll send them a sketch and I say, okay, I want you to generate a final rendering of this, and I'll get it back, and I'll mark it up, and I'll send it back to them. And you go through this process for about a week until you get to your final, and I know a lot of you guys have done that. So I'm like, let me just start doing that with AI. So I started to take my screen grabs and say, okay, this is what I've got. This is how I want you to count those points. This is what you're showing me. And this is what's wrong. And so it got better. It started to be able to recognize, okay, I see the pattern that's going on, and I see where I made a mistake in the code. So it made a change. And we got closer. And we kind of went through that for a bit of cycle. And then I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Me marking all of this up is taking a lot of time. How about we build in another layer to this, where we build in a graphic interface where you can read directly, once I take a screen grab, who the player is. We color-coded the cards now, and we put a chip on the card so that you can tell how many points you are the game is generating, and you can look at this and you can kind of self-diagnose what is wrong, right? I can tell you what I think it needs to be. I can tell you which ones are right, and then once I kind of did this, like we were able to kind of like solve the problem a lot faster. So what I want to say is ChatGPT or whatever tool you're using is great kind of to converse with. It also really understands images really well, right? And it can analyze those in a way that I couldn't see the pattern. I couldn't see why it was getting the math wrong, right? I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't figure out how it was getting to that. Now, I was spending minutes. I'm sure I could have if I spent a bit more time to kind of really work through it. But in seconds, it could look at it and say, oh, I see why it was counting this. That's really, really powerful. So I just want to kind of open up that when we start thinking about using these tools. Now, a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is I'm using Visual Studio Code. And this was the reason I was not going to get into 3 today, because while it's not super complicated, it's a whole other level I'm not going to get into today. But what we're going to do is we're going to use this platform, PlayCode. And if you look at it, it's actually quite similar. And what's really nice about it is I've got my file tree, so I can have my HTML file, I can have my JavaScript file, I can have my style, which tells the HTML how we want it to look. I've got my code section, which is that section obviously there in the middle, there. But then it also is giving me a live window that as I make changes in the code, I don't have to save it. It's just instantly re-rendering into this window, which is fantastic. It's also got a console built in, so if there's major errors, it should tell you. I will say that as I did a test with this yesterday, it wasn't always flagging the errors that my browser would flag. So just something kind of be aware of. Okay. Couple things before we get in. You are architects. You are not coders. I am not a coder. We speak architecture. But I think it's helpful to understand a little bit about how the files are structured, just so that you can kind of find your way around. So we really are thinking about this as a system. We're, as we design buildings, buildings are systems. Architecture is systems. There's no difference to what we're doing here. We've got things that exist. Those things have a form. They have a color. They have material. They have a behavior. They are observed from somewhere, and they change over time. And I'm going to unpack that. Things exist. So typically that sits in your state. Now, in a small project, all of this might be in the same file. As your files get more and more complicated, it helps to break these things out. We will ask the chat GPT or whatever you're using to help you organize your file structure. I'm not asking you to think through this necessarily. I'm just trying to help you understand what it's doing. So when it gives you files, and then you come back and say, well, something's not working, it says, okay, we need to replace this piece. You kind of have a sense of where that's going and what it's doing. So things exist. So basically, in state, we're just establishing that there is a ball. We haven't told it what the ball looks like. We just said there is a ball that exists in this universe, and we have to have a universe for that to exist. So there has to be a scene. That's what we're doing in state. In update, we are giving it a behavior. We're saying that ball is here, now that ball is here, now that ball is here. In animate, we're saying, well, between those states, I want to, it's like slides on a PowerPoint. I might have a slide, but between those slides, I want it to fit in nicely or something like that. That's what animate does. I don't necessarily need it, but it adds a nice overlay to what's happening in update. Render is where things start to appear, right? So up until this point, they don't actually exist visibly. In render, we are going to now say those things that exist, well, they've got a color, they've got a size, they've got properties. We can see them from somewhere, we can see them from where the camera is, and there's lighting in the universe. All of that is happening in render. And then main is basically controlling, well, within that universe, time moves at a certain pace, the camera has certain properties, those kinds of things sit in main, and they feed into these other files. There's not going to be a test on this. When you start breaking things out in multiple files, it's helpful to know how these files are connected, right? Like, they don't just live in your dash and instantly know that other things exist elsewhere. You've just got to tell it that they exist, right? So basically, a file is a module, it's a box, it's got part of your code. We've broken it out in a way that makes sense for you to navigate. Some of the files, some of the projects I'm working on, and these are baby projects, already have dozens of files. So very quickly, these files can become projects can become much bigger. So, but basically, in state or in any file, if I've got something that I'm creating, I've got a function, and I want something else to pay attention to it, I basically create a port. I have to export that function out. I have to import that function into something else. That file then knows what to do with it because I told it. So they have to connect. And then the way this is working, we kind of saw this a little bit in the play code just a moment ago, is most of the work we're doing is within this Three.js container, right? So whether it's this one file or multiple files, you've got a number of functions or behaviors, roles that are happening. That's within Three.js. For that to live on the web, we're packaging that inside of an HTML file. And most of the times those are really, really simple. It's basically creating a container, and then within that container we say, we want you to load this script. This is where my Three.js lives, this is what I want you to load. And then we've got the UI that kind of sits on top of that to let us interact with both the HTML and what's happening inside of the Three.js. Super fast crash course, but I thought it may just be helpful as we kind of get into it. Is that fuzzy as muddy water? Yeah. Hopefully it'll make more sense. And the way I built the prompt, so this is where we're not gonna, like, I'm gonna do a demo first. We're gonna see how it goes. I did this yesterday and it worked. And so I've repackaged my prompt and I'm gonna start it again and we're gonna see how I do. No promises that it doesn't break, but that's part of the process. But I've got a prompt set up and this is on the Discord that you can use. I'm gonna use this to start my chat session here in just a moment. The one on Discord is much longer, so for 1 through 7, I've got a few little bullet points. But basically, I'm just I'm priming the chat in terms of how I want to work with it, right? So I like to use the chat as a collaborator. I want to kind of start with something. I recognize that it is much smarter when it comes to code. So I also wanted to, when I pitch out an idea, I am notorious for pitching out really big, very complicated ideas, and then have to figure out a way to get there. So I want the chat to also tell me that. I don't want to start a project that is actually going to take me, 6 weeks, and I want to be able to kind of work on this incrementally. So how do we break this down? I want to prioritize clarity and structure, so I built some things into that prompt. So it will help make the code that you're reviewing and looking at much easier to understand. It should be really well commented out. Tops of files should have headers that say, hey, this is what this file is doing, and this is what it's responsible for, and this is how it's plugged into other files. Right? It should have banners on top of functions, as well as end comments. I find it's really hard sometimes to find the end of a function. Like when you get miles of code, like finding the start and the stop of things can be somewhat difficult. So the prompt has that built in, so it should make it really easy to say, here's the start and the stop of this function. So if you've got to come in and insert something later to make it do something that it wasn't doing, it should be easier. I have also asked it to, when it can, at least for now, go ahead and give you whole chunks of replacement functions. So a lot of what I do, it is giving me snippets. It's like, okay, let's go in and let's just rewrite these couple statements within a function. For today, I've asked it to let's wholesale replace functions. That's going to be a whole lot easier than scanning through and finding things. So I've built a lot of that stuff in here. So this is all on the Discord that you should be able to copy and paste directly into chat. And I think, yes, with that, I'm going to try. And let's see what happens. And then once I do a little bit of a demo, we're going to see where I get. So it is 2:45. maybe I'll spend the next 10, 15 minutes and see what I can do in a demo. I can continue to play with that, but maybe that gets you at a good point where you can get in and start thinking about what you want to test or what you want to try while we're in this space. What I would be thinking about is low entry point, right? We're not trying to build a full 3D rendered world. Make a cool graphic, like some of the things I showed you early on. If you can find an inspiration, maybe start with that. Like if you find an inspiration photo, you're like, oh, I'd really love to do this. Put the image in chat and say, I want to generate this inside this 3JS and see what happens. Or, like I said, you can do some sort of really interesting utility. It could be really basic, like my little gradients tool, right? Super simple, but honestly very useful. I've already used it probably dozens of times because I know it's there. I can quickly go there if I need it. The floor pattern, that becomes another one. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to try to build a programming tool that allows me to enter spaces with square footages, and it'll generate bubbles, relative size, and connections between those. Super simple. I can do all this in Rhino and those sorts of things, but can I build a tool that will let me just do this in the web? It's going to be a very basic version. Here's my water. Close. Down. Copy my prompt. I'm going to try to start the same place you do. So I'm going to start with the same initial prompt and then build off of that. So docs. Okay, here's the prompt that I put in ChatGPT, or not, I put it in Discord for you, so I'm gonna copy this, and I'm gonna paste this in chat, and we'll get started. Okay. All right, so I've asked it to, it's already started to propose a file structure that we can create the moment that we get started. Two quick questions so I don't hallucinate. That was something I put in the prompt. It's sometimes can decide just to well, you might have something like this in the code, so plug this in, and then you go and you look, you're like, that's not in my code at all. So I've asked it to ask for specific chunks of code. Are we starting from an empty file? Yes. What's the thing we want to see working? Okay, I'll pull it back in just a moment. In fact, let me see if I can do this here. I'm going to test something out because I've not done this. The other day, I was brainstorming about something on ChatGPT, and then I set my phone down and thought I was done. And then it asked me a question, and I didn't realize where this really sultry voice had come from. And then I turned around and it's like, oh, it's the chat. It's asking me a question. Somehow it hit the voice command. And since then, I've come to enjoy actually chatting with the ChatGPT bot. So let me see. What I haven't tried is, can I do it concurrently in the same session? I think I can. Okay, great. So we are definitely going to start with a brand new space. We don't have any existing code. I do have an idea that I would like to explore with you. I'm working on a live workshop right now. You are my partner in this process. And I want to create a small and useful architectural program, diagram tool, think bubbles, blocks, and adjacencies. I want it to feel like a studio exercise, quick and legible, and open to iteration. So let's aim for something that's stable, clear, and has small wins as we go. Before we jump into the code, let's talk about feasibility and choose a sensible version 1. If there's anything that I ask about that starts to feel really big and hairy, please say so, and propose a smaller version that we can ship within the time we have. If you're on board, let me know, and I'll drop into the chat a few initial thoughts.
Absolutely, I'm on board, and that all sounds fantastic. I love the idea of keeping it quick, legible, and really studio-friendly. We'll definitely flag any big and hairy requests and break them down into manageable chunks so we can get a nice and stable version 1 out of the gate. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and share those initial thoughts, and we'll start shaping this thing out.
I'm going to end that real quick, and I'm going to copy this in. So when I did this yesterday, basically what I started with was what I just kind of read out. I cleaned it up a little bit because I was like stream of consciousness and nobody really wants to see that. That's between you and my chatbot, and it will just stay there. But in doing that, I kind of ran into a few things. Like the first time I did this, I had no way to, the bubbles started to appear, but I had no way to control, I had no way to zoom in. Like we didn't build any sort of like interaction. So the bubbles would appear, but I couldn't change, and they were kind of like interacting with themselves. So I couldn't zoom in or I couldn't pan. So I built that into this prompt that I'm about to give it right now. I'm just out of the gate, I want to do that. It also had a feature where, based on the way we built it, I don't know what we're going to get today, you build in agency or adjacencies when you add your bubbles. If you don't build in the adjacency, these things have a repulsiveness to them, like the way this code was written yesterday at least, where bubbles started to push apart. And so if I would place a space that had no adjacency, I mean it had no tether to anything else, it just started to float away. And I couldn't go find it because I couldn't zoom out. So immediately this becomes, okay, this is something we've got to fix and we've got to add into it, right? So let's paste this in and let's see what happens. So it's wanting me to go ahead and create some files. Let's do that real quick. And then it'll generate some code. I say he, because his voice obviously goes up he to me. And okay, so in here, this is the default. There isn't AI built in here. I've not used it. I have used some of the integrated AIs in Visual Code, and sometimes that's really helpful, and they can do some really good things. Use whatever you feel comfortable with. If you've been using something, I find that's the most important thing, is understanding how it's working and have an expectation. So I'm going to close that, and I'm not going to use it. I am going to hit clone project, because if I start to do anything in here and I've not cloned the project, then I haven't actually created an instance for it to work in. And so it's not being saved in any way. So I'm going to clone the project, and so now it's going to clone. To change the name, and I'm just going to say workshop for now. Let's see what we can do. It asked me to create a couple files. So I'm going to go here and set up a new file. And these are all JavaScripts that I'm creating right now, so I can just choose JavaScript. So I've got main. Let's see, I've got view. State. Now this is where if you are using integrated AI with Visual Studio Code or something, you can tell it to generate these files and it will give in. If you've given it the permission and it can do all of this stuff, that all comes down to your comfort level and letting the AI actually make changes to your files. What else? And those are all. Okay. Starting from empty. We'll just do that in the chat. Okay, this all sounds great. Let's work to our version 1 basic and let's see where we get. You asked if we are starting from an empty play code, and we are. So we assume we have got nothing in these files that we've just set up. I simply set up our, is it listening? Yes. Our basic file structure, the layout.js, main.js, etc. And so give me everything we need to put into these files. And I copy paste. Okay.
Absolutely. Let's jump right in and set up that version 1 foundation. I'll walk you through kind of copy paste targets. You can drop these snippets right into your main.js and layout.js to get a working prototype going. So for main.js, let's start by getting a super simple 3JS scene up and running. That means a basic scene, a camera and a render, and then in layout.js, we'll set up a really minimal UI panel where we can have those bubbles and blocks in the next step. So let me just get that code up for you.
Great, thank you. Maybe there is a disconnect slightly between the two. It obviously knows what I'm doing, but I don't know if it's updating in the web browser as fast. Let's go over it.
Alright, let's do it. So we'll start with the main.js. This will just be a really simple 3JS setup that you can pop in. It's going to create a scene, add a camera, a render, and just give us a little animation loop so we know everything's working. And then in layout.js, we'll add a tiny UI panel so that we've got a place to eventually add those bubbles and blocks. So here's your main.js snippet. Just main.js, import is 3 from 3. Like camera, new 3 perspective camera, 75, window under width, window under height, 0.100. The render, new 3 webgeo render, render set size, window under width, window under height, document body.
I don't think we need to read out the text. Give me a few loose files here. So I've got main, I've got got state already. View, I've got UI, and okay, so my config, it's now giving me the code for my config file. So we'll drop that in here. So my file is empty. It is not anymore. My state file. down. Layout. Which I'm going to like point out really quick what's happening here. My UI is a JavaScript file, but it's wrapping, and that's what you see here in green, it's wrapping within the JavaScript and HTML piece. So we're actually going to be interacting with the HTML piece, but it's creating a container within the JavaScript for that to run. So nothing has changed in my window yet, and that's because I have not made any changes to my index file. Right, so my index is the web HTML that's pointing to the code. So I still have in that file, or in that file structure, the original script.js, which is what's currently running. So we haven't changed any of that yet, but we're here at the moment. Name.js. So these names should sound familiar to what we just talked about a moment ago. And so what I am noticing immediately is it did not give me an index file code to drop into the index file. So let's fix that just a moment. So it's here. Okay. Let's try this. Okay. Immediately, I do have an issue. So, so this did give me the console error. If you are running this in a browser, so I can come over here and I can click Open Preview in a new window. So it's now solving what that problem is. And so I don't have anything happening here. In Chrome, in any of these other browsers, you can, I think it's Control-Shift-I. Yes, you can also go up here to the top and go to More Tools, Developer Tools, or you can right-click in the space and go to Inspect. All of these bring up basically Chrome or the browser's kind of built-in developer kind of package. And in the console, it should give you error warnings. Good catch. Okay, Cynic check. What's that? Say that again? What do I?
Delete this main dot
Delete this main dot I think that was where I had created.
was main.js file, and the anything was not deleting the main.js file.
My main JS file is what you're putting all of the
Yeah,
JS.
previous file. It was keeping the index.js file in the main.js file. The name was just changed. So the next time you added the index.js.
So in my index HTML, I pointed to main.js. So that's where all of my file is running. So that should be right. This is gonna take, okay, this is part of the process, and I'm gonna have to navigate this here in just a moment. I'm gonna show you really quickly what I built yesterday, and then I'm gonna troubleshoot this, and I'm gonna get you guys started, because I don't know how long it's gonna take me. It should be fast, but sometimes it's not super fast. So let me show you what I did yesterday. I spent probably about an hour or so creating this. Let me open up a new for this. Let me hit file save. Save. Okay, so I just saved this project. I'm going to open up another play code. And I'm going to come down here to project dashboard. That's what it saves it. So yesterday, this is what I created. And I'm going to just open this in here. So it's a really basic tool, but the prompt that I kind of gave it yesterday generated this that allows me to, and this took a couple iterations. So again, at first I couldn't move here, I couldn't zoom out. So there were some things that it couldn't do. When I created programs to start with, they were just float away. But now I can come in and I can add a new, let's make a gymnasium. I don't know, it's been a few years since I've done a school. I'm going to say about 5,000 square feet. And sure, it's a type of classroom. Let's connect it to the lobby. So now I'm going to add a space, and so it did that. I can now click on my gymnasium. I can add, I also want it to be close to the admin, and I can add that adjacency, and so it now starts to build this. I can click on spaces, it tells me which spaces are linked to other spaces. I also built in, after the fact, I wanted to be able to edit this, so I built in a separate UI that lets me open up any space, change its name, change its area, change its adjacencies, all of those things, just a really quick kind of UI. So I will try to get this to that same point here in a moment. I've run into a little snag that I've got to chase down, but that's the process. What I'm going to do, you're welcome to watch me do it, but I also just want to get you guys to start doing some things as well, because we've got about an hour left. So I should give you time to get in and start doing something. You saw how fast I was to go from 0 to code. Even though it's broken at the moment, I'm pretty close to getting something to work. I just have to figure out exactly what's going on. So I'd love to get you guys started. Any questions about just getting started now? Probably a lot. So that's up to you. So what I would think about is I didn't come prepped with okay, everybody should work on this. What I'd love for you to be able to do is leave here with something that you feel, okay, I just made something and I know how I can kind of build on this in some way. So it could be a graphic. Like the graphic that I did early on, I did several of those kind of 2D graphics. You could completely do that in 3JS, and that's a great place to start. You can then, once you've got a graphic, if you want to turn that into an animated graphic, that's fantastic too. If you want to create some sort of little utility, you can do that as well. So what I would do is I would take the prompt that I gave you in terms of like priming the AI, like this is how we want to work. So what I shared a moment ago, and I kind of gave AI, I told you, okay, this is how I want you to operate, you're a coding partner, we're collaborating, we're building something. And so I would take that, it's shared to the Discord. I can pull it, well, not if I'm trying to solve this. It's shared to the Discord. If I need to share that another way, let me know, and I'll try to figure out that. The Discord server is going to be the easiest way to get to it. So I would drop that into ChatGPT. You can also just write your own. You can just drop in some things I mentioned. You don't have to use mine verbatim. And then once you've got that, then just ideate. Just have like, okay, I want to build something, right? It doesn't have to be really well-defined. You could say, I just want to create a tool that lets me do this thing, right? And that's a great place to start. It'll give you something that then you can respond to and say, okay, I like what we just did, but I want to be able to have this functionality. Or I want to be able to do this to it. Or, ooh, this is way off. Whatever it is, it gives you something to respond to if you don't have a clear idea. And so I find that's a really fun way to work. Like I think about it as I'm sitting at a table with a bunch of people and we're starting a project, right? And we just start throwing out ideas. Use the AI as bouncing those ideas back to you. Okay? Questions?
I'm still gonna be the word start.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So,
Okay,
so literally from this, what's the first step we should all?
So the first step is, do you have your ChatGPT or other coding like AI partner open? Like, have you used ChatGPT or like, what do you guys use? Like, I use ChatGPT almost exclusively. There are a lot of others out there. You're welcome to use any that you feel comfortable with. This is just the one that I've been using. So we've got quite a long history at this point. So start with that. I would also start with Play Code Open. So the initial window, the playcode.io /3JS. With those two, you're ready to kind of get into it.
So what do you do after that?
Okay, after that, I would take the prompt that I gave you. You want to prime ChatGPT on terms of how he wants to think.
So if we don't have the prompt on screen, where do we get it?
You can get that from the Discord server.
Okay.
So if you, I can show you how to get that.
I have a question. This prompt, I was just trying to understand what its purpose is. Is it just to set up the sandbox essentially?
It is just setting up the
There's no
sandbox.
actual assignment. You
No,
just
not
say,
yet.
here's the general situation. And then once that is,
It should then tell you, once you put that in place, it should say, okay, I know that I'm working with you in a collaborative way. These are the types of files I might think about, the type of project you're going to do. Right, so it should then ready time for you to start conversing.
there's nothing in there about what it is.
No. What it does do, I built in, is I told it that you are working in plain code. There is an issue I ran into yesterday that there's a setting that's in plain code that's not in other platforms that I had to work around. So I set that up within the prompt that it knows that that's the environment you're working in. But in terms of what you're building, what your project is, it doesn't have any of those parameters yet.
And then within the play code, there's your project. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that?
That is
just a demo.
That is just a demo, and that is not mine. That is actually just.
That's theirs?
That's theirs.
Okay.
That's their
We just
default.
sort of delete that? Or?
You can delete that. What I would do is, so 3 or 4 files in that initial play code that's running that. Alright, so the initial play code has 4 files. The index.html, and you see that right here. It's super, super simple. It's just saying create a container. Inside that container, we're going to load this script. That's all it's doing. It is then loading script.js. So everything that is running on that screen lives in this file right here. We are not going to create a new script.js. So it's okay to live there. It's okay just to delete it as well. Once you rewrite index, it's going to point to a new location in terms of what file it's trying to load into.
What's the name of this program again? I'm typing it into my chat.
Playcode.io.
Playcode.io.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions in terms of getting started? It's copy paste between. So what I typically do is I'll have 2 windows side by side.
Okay.
So you'll prime ChatGPT with your prompt, and that'll set up its sandbox, how it wants to think. Within that, then you will tell it, okay, this is what I want to build. I want to make this cool, interesting graphic or whatever. And then it should start to generate the code. It should ask you some questions to refine that. Say, okay, I like what you're thinking, but maybe let's shoot for like a small iterative step to that. Whatever, right? It should give you some conversation. Once you've got code, then you will copy paste that into Playcode, and it should tell you specifically what files to paste it into.